all media, right? Whether it's entertaining, whether it's informative, whether it's persuasive, right? Like that's the whole point of this. And I think why media literacy is so powerful is that it's not only can you read and understand other people's messages, but you can create your own. And we always do that is when we're asking our students to create a message to think about what they want to convey.
Childhood isn't broken, but it is being reprogrammed. This is The Slow Scroll, a conversation about kids, tech, and the slow work of growing up in a world built for instant everything. We're not here to romanticize the past or panic about the future. We're here to think harder about what kids need, what adults missed, and how schools can be a place to get it right. Each episode is a chance to untangle the messy intersection of tech, identity, learning, and growth with curiosity, honesty, and a deep respect for what childhood can still be.
Okay. Are you guys cool if we move to emotional manipulation?
Yes.
Okay.
Why did you say it like that? I feel like you're trying to manipulate me.
Yeah. I was trying to scare you. Okay. When we talked about this last time, I told you that I saw this commercial that really made me angry, which was not the intentional emotion it was trying to elicit. Did I show you the commercial?
I don't recall. I feel like maybe you put a link to it, but I don't know if I watched it.
Okay.
Full
I was
transparency.
too mad. I was too mad to go watch it.
There you go. Can we watch it real quick?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Pretend you can't see the bottom. That way you can put yourself in my shoes. I'm sitting there with my wife on the couch watching like Monday Night Football. And very rarely do I ever actually see commercials these days because either we're not like when we don't watch live TV, we don't have live TV, but I get YouTube TV for football season. So I'm watching this and I turn to Anna and I go, "Oh my gosh." And I'm getting like, it's so blatant. I'm not sure, like when I was doing like research for what we were going to be talking about, like empathy bombing or empathy attacks aren't really like an established media literacy term, I guess. And so like when I Googled it and did some research, I ran into some barriers in that sense. But like that's what I've always called it. It's like an empathy attack or an empathy bomb where they're clearly trying to manipulate my emotions and make me sad or empathetic. Anyway, so here is the commercial as it is. Let me know if you can or cannot hear this.
Pick up. Joe, pick up the phone.
Okay, pause. What are you noticing so far? We're 10 seconds in. What have you seen?
I have seen that he's in the military and he's panicked.
Ooh.
Yeah, I feel like the tone is very obvious. And then that little glimpse of his phone shows what I would presume are friends of his that are also in the military.
Yes. So I, because it's commercial, I wasn't watching the screen when this first came on. I just heard it. And I think that's important because I missed this. So I scanned to 8 seconds in here and we can see he's clearly making a call as he drives. Hands free, I'll have you know, right? We got to follow the rules of the road here. And he's clearly calling someone, Joseph D. And there's a picture of him in like desert fatigues in the military. He is a person of color next to a white man on this. So it's like a picture of them, right? So I didn't even see that. I think I picked up the commercial probably like here as he's getting out of the car and he's running to the door. And so I think that's important because there's a lot of visual cues that are here. But like if you hear like the music is somber, and like his voice, Debbie, I think that's the perfect description. Panicked, right? He seems to be like he's on tear. He's like on the verge of tears. He's like worried. Okay, here's the rest of the commercial.
Open up, man.
Oh, didn't see this either. There's some words on the screen.
Connection saves lives. Reach out and check in on a loved one today.
Okay, so I see that commercial and I am too busy yelling in my wife's direction, not at her. Let's make the distinction. Yelling in my wife's direction, saying things like, "Are you kidding me? I hate this." And so importantly, I missed the words on the screen, which are like, it's actually probably important to actually go find them. The words that came across the screen as I was too involved with my own garbage to read them. Someone dies by suicide every 11 minutes. Suicide rates are 72% higher for veterans. Okay, so I missed that as I'm screaming, and it's having an unintended emotional reaction for me. And so it's not until the very end when the agency comes up on the screen and it says the Wounded Warrior Project, which is perfect because this is an occurrence that happens all the time in my house where I'm having an outsized, immediate, knee-jerk reaction to something. And my wife is like, "Hey, look, stupid. If you had waited 13 more seconds, you'd see that this is a pretty like honorable cause, right? Like this is a commercial from the Wounded Warrior Project, 30 seconds, that is calling attention to the fact that there's a higher suicide rate for combat veterans, right? And so then she says, "So what do you want them to do?" Because I'm doubling down at this point. I'm going, they're trying to make me cry. They are trying to prey on my emotions. I think it's important to call out right now, I'm having an inappropriate emotional reaction to this. I don't think in hindsight, I'm in the right in this scenario. And because then she says, "Well, what would you want them to do?" And I said, it was her saying that provided a little moment of clarity for me and helped me recognize that I'm being an idiot. And so I diffused and said, "I don't know. That's not my problem. I just don't like it. They shouldn't do that. It's not my job to fix it," like joking around. And she rolled her eyes and we moved on and whatever. Right. And so I think that's an interesting medium, because the reason I had such an outsized reaction is because it was so blatantly emotional manipulation. And like I picked up on it with like paying 15% attention to it. The music and the tone of voice and the cut of and it was just so in your face that I was like, how could anybody fall for this? And then I had this weird like cognitive dissonance at the end where it was for a cause that is for a really good cause, that what I would support. Right. And so I don't have a ton of answers on this one. I just thought it was an interesting in the wild example of a gray area in media literacy and using emotions to manipulate an audience.
I'm sorry, Stefan. I'm thinking about this.
Because you're wrong. No.
Well, tell me why, because I'd love to argue about this one.
I don't know. No, that was a lot to unpack. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, go ahead. Vanessa, you're going to say it so nicely.
I don't know. It immediately makes me think about, first you said like, and I was in the wrong, but like, isn't the whole point of this to like pause and be reflective? And that's what you're doing now, right? Like you notice this thing about yourself, your wife helps you pause and like reframe, and then now you're bringing it up in a space. So like those are all things that we would want our students to be able to model.
Sure.
That said, like then it makes
Debbie's
me think
laughing at us, and I don't know why.
Then probably be because of the nice part. I don't know. But then it also makes me think of like the anxious generation and the need for us to connect in person. And I think that was the part of the messaging, is like it has to elicit that emotional response to reach you in a way that would uh, be more likely that you would act, right? That you would do something different. And so, like, bringing it full circle, like, how might we help students recognize, okay, this could be for good, as in this situation, but you may encounter it in other spaces. And like, how are you pausing, being reflective before immediately acting?
Yeah, I mean, that didn't stop me from immediately reacting, right? In the safety of my own home, right? And I'm the one
Mm-hmm.
choosing to bring it forward. I get that. And so, yes, I would agree with you that, as usual, I am a prime example of good and paragon virtue. That's definitely what's happening here, Vanessa. No, it's, yes, we want our students to stop and pause when a piece of media or something gives them an emotional reaction. It's one of the things that, what's her name? Jennifer Lagarde. You guys know who I'm talking about? I saw her at NCCE a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I took away from her presentation is, when you're thinking about seeing things online, you're looking for misinformation, disinformation, as opposed to saying, is this true or is this synthetic or fabricated? You should be asking, how is this supposed to make me feel?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the emotional reactions I'm having to this? And so I think that's the forefront of my brain, which is why I see things like this and I'm like, it's so blatant. I can't believe you would do that to me. And I get like kind of sort of offended. And I found, we were just watching, I found it on YouTube. I have the YouTube comments pulled up, which, again, not the greatest place to go for any kind of evidence. I understand that. But anecdotally, if I just read off a couple of the top comments, this ad made me cry. I'm so grateful that the Wounded Warrior Project is doing this. This hit me hard. Lost my beloved son-in-law, former Army captain, last year. We need to do better for our veterans. This commercial hit me hard. Incredible ad. I was relieved he was alive. Paid actor, mind you, right? Like, I'm not watching a documentary. It's like, if you look at these comments on here, clearly, as long as these are real people and not social media bots, which they very well could be, this is having the intended effect on people. And what worries me, or the question I guess I'm left wondering about, is, what's the morality of blatantly manipulating someone's sense of empathy, even if it's for a good cause? Because, yeah.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack here. And I think that's a really good question. But I would guess that depending on your personal experience, that ad is going to hit you differently. If you have a firsthand experience of losing somebody that way, then that's going to hit you differently than somebody who maybe hasn't been through that. And so I would, and I don't think those are bots, because the bots are on there to do divisive work, not to, talk about how much they like something. And I think you're both making like really great points, because I think, for Vanessa's point, to say, because I think that's always my thing, is, what's the call to action, right? Now I'm going to be suspicious if at the end they're asking me to go buy something, but the fact that this wasn't a go spend your money now, it was an awareness campaign. It was a be aware of this. And I loved that check on each other, that human piece. And so I think I'm less offended, because they're not saying, evoking these emotions and then asking me to go donate money or spend money. Right now, that's probably a byproduct, that people feel connected to this and hopefully do. I mean, and again, that's not a bad thing. And I think this is where, when we talk about media literacy, I think this is where it's very nuanced, because for the longest time, it was always, they're tricking you. Don't be tricked. Right. We've talked about that, Stefan, this whole scare tactic of, how dare, like, don't let them pull one over on you. And the fact of the matter is, you asked, is it like ethical to manipulate emotions like this. And the fact is that is all media, right? Whether it's entertaining, whether it's informative, whether it's persuasive, right? Like that's the whole point of this. And I think why media literacy is so powerful is that it's not only can you read and understand other people's messages, but you can create your own. And we always do that is when we're asking our students to create a message to think about what they want to convey. And so I think it's not necessarily is this right or wrong. It's really about when is it appropriate and not appropriate. And when do you really need to be aware of it and not aware of it, you know? And I think if you really try to like separate emotions into our decision making, I mean, that's really impossible, right? If you think about that. And so even when it does come to consumer and spending money, it's not always bad. Sometimes it's no, that's exactly what I want to spend my money on. But I think being manipulated into trying something because it's going to solve all the answers to your problems, you know what I mean? Like those are some of those tactics we want kids to just be aware of.
Can I show you another one and get your take on it?
Sure.
Okay. It's a little bit longer. It's better if you don't know what this commercial is for. So this is going to be weird, but could you close your eyes just real quick? Debbie's definitely the type to try to peek. So, oh, come on. It's on this dang laptop. I can't.
It's all right. My eyes are closed, but I think it's funny because one of my thoughts was, what if we just turn our cameras off? Like we wouldn't see yours.
Excellent.
You turn your camera off, even though you're sharing your screen. You turn your camera
That's really
off.
funny. Okay. Let me hit play and see if this is going to show anything. This is the part where we need to stop if people are just listening. I'm going to cut. We just spent 2 minutes watching a commercial, and we will link that in the show notes. So pause wherever you're listening to this. Go click on the link in the show notes. Go watch that commercial and see if you can guess before the end. Try not to look at the description. See if you can guess what that was a commercial for. I was watching you, Debbie and Vanessa, to see your reactions, specifically looking to see if either of you started to cry.
Oh, geez.
What was being sold there?
A feeling.
A feeling. What was the product they're trying to get you to buy?
Oh, Vanessa.
Alcohol?
Whiskey.
Well, you can tell how much I drink, apparently.
Vanessa, not the target audience.
It's definitely. Well, maybe
maybe
the commercial.
My two favorite things.
There you go. See, like, beautiful commercial, right? Mm-hmm. Do you guys know who George Couros is?
No.
He does a lot of work with Katie Novak, Catelyn Tucker. He likes to take credit for being the one that connected the two, like hooked them together. He came and presented at our leadership summit a couple years ago. And if you ever get a chance to see him live, do it. He's unbelievable. He talks at 1,000,000 miles a minute. He went for like an hour and a half straight. I was riveted the whole time. He is an unbelievable presenter. And one of the things, he was delivering a speech on belonging. And he was kind of talking about this like emotional manipulation stuff a little bit. And so he showed that commercial, and he liked to point out that like, I'll show this thing and I'll have, before people see what it's for, I'll have people crying in the audience, right? Like if you're a parent, you see this commercial of this dad spending, it's a beautiful story, beautiful for whiskey. So considering like the thing you said about it depends on the message, what are your thoughts after seeing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, that's misaligned. And I thought it was going to be for some sort of literacy or, you know, this whole idea that, you know, and I'm kind of riding off the wave of the last one. It was like, oh, it's going to be about, you know, whatever. And it's never too late. There was all these uplifting messages. And it was not crying, but it was definitely pulling on the heartstrings.
Empowering.
Yeah. And then I laughed. I scoffed at the end when I saw it.
I wish you'd had your mic on. You looked like you gave a big laugh.
Yeah. So it's like, is it supposed to be funny? Because if it's supposed to be funny, but it's not. Clearly, it's not supposed to be funny. It's manufacturing this feeling inside of you to sell this drink.
But from a marketing perspective, if you have an audience that you are trying to market to, or like something that you want your target customer base to like associate with your product, like maybe that's the intent. Like if you are hardworking, if you are dedicated, if you are a, family man, I don't know what the connections are there, but I think about like subliminal messaging and that sort of thing. So like if you're in marketing, like you are trying to be strategic. So maybe they are misaligned, but would you be more likely to think of that particular whiskey in the store when you're, buying it to, you know, uh,
Mm.
attend some sort of celebration or a retirement party or yeah.
That's
So I mean,
interesting, right? Because it's not that they're trying to get you to run out the door right now and go buy a bottle of whiskey, but you're right. If you're standing in the aisle looking at the shelf trying to choose one, oh, I remember this one has a warm and fuzzy feeling.
mm-hmm. Well, and I don't even know that you would
All
necessarily,
whiskey has a warm and fuzzy feeling, but
but I don't know that you would like necessarily be making that like conscious decision. I think when you're like just looking at the variety, like you're going to be more likely because your brain has an association with that or potentially.
Well, and it also makes me think of Simon Sinek has this. I was watching him give some talk, a video of him giving some talk, and say people don't buy what you do, or people don't follow you because of what you do. They follow you because why you do it. And I mean, when I asked, what's that a commercial for? What is that selling? Debbie said, an emotion, or like, you're right. That's not a whiskey commercial. That's a dopamine drip. That's an empathy drip. Like I knew it was coming, and I'm not the most emotional person, like not in that sense, right? We just talked about me having an outside emotional reaction, an angry one to a commercial. I watched that, and like I see that as a dad, of young kids. And that is a message of here is a father who loves his son so much. He is putting in hours and hours and making sacrifices still so he can fully appreciate the work that his son is doing. He's getting nothing out of that other than just showcasing the love for it. And just, that is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. And I don't know, to then see the Bell's whiskey come up at the end, it's kind of like I don't know, I see that and go, seriously? But I wonder how much of that is because I feel like maybe I'm constantly on alert for those types of things. It also has me thinking about, like, because I'm wondering about how to support students or our own kids in avoiding that or being aware of those types of things because it's not natural, right? I think kids are pretty perceptive, but the TV commercials are a lot more blatant than things they'll see on social media. And so I'm just wondering about how do you coach that? How do you support that with your own kids, with your own students, if you're in the classroom, in a way that is sustainable or effective?
Yeah. Well, and I kind of thought about that too, because I think about how in a commercial, it is similar to social media in the sense that who knows what came on in either of those commercials right after that. It could have been a funny Doritos commercial, right? And then all of a sudden you go from this, oh, to ha ha ha, and you don't have that processing time. And that is a big part of what, the work you and I have done with some of the digital wellness stuff for students is understanding that. And I think it's one of those things that you can't say this will never happen. It's more of an awareness and a self-regulation piece. And so, I think that our world is so high speed, right? We move so fast and we're not equipped to move from those emotional triggers so quickly without processing in between. And so I think helping people recognize that, because I think what you mean too is kids do know when they're unregulated, right? Like they can tell, that this is starting, I was just watching, I was at a school district this week, and they showed a video of they had interviewed all the students across the district, and they kind of put together this montage. But the part of the messaging that came through were students talking about they can tell when it's been too much, and and that feeling of stress that comes along with it. And so, I think it's being aware, that part that you do with the students, Stefan, around these emotions, right? It's like they're trying to get you to feel something. And so if you can stop and what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? And valuing that ability to slow down and recognize and regulate when you're interacting with these. I don't think you should say, don't ever do it. It's kind of, these are the emotional regulation skills that go along with using it. Similar to when you're driving a car, you shouldn't be really angry, right? I mean, I remember learning that in driver's ed, and I remember my brother reminding me that one time when I was trying to get in the car when I was mad. But, there is a certain emotional regulation we do with these same thing with a gun, right? Should you be using a gun under high emotional triggers? No, right? So I think that why are we treating it any differently?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it makes me think about the anxious generation and how, some of what he talked about was like the junk food piece. So, Stefan, like when you're talking about, how do you make it sustainable? I think whether we're in like the parent role or the teacher role, like continuing to bring that up in conversation. So we know in whatever digital spaces, a large part of that is making us feel or act, and asking the students or our children to like be mindful of what they're consuming and for how long. And then, modeling, and maybe, in our parent role, helping them to like, moderate, I guess, like their time in these spaces. And while it's not always possible, I do think that that's where like the dialogue as a parent or a teacher is so important after. Hey, let's have conversation around this. And for you, Stefan, to like model your reaction, whether or not your kids were um, keenly aware of like what the commercial was, like you are modeling it for them. Hey, I saw this thing. It makes me feel this way. And like they get to see how your wife is like prompting you with questions. So I don't know. The full circle piece is, I'm just thinking, how do we in our personal lives and as teachers or educators in whatever spaces have dialogue, model these types of things for them. And maybe, even moderating or evaluating ourselves and our tech use and our own feelings and how that's affecting us positively or negatively.
And I like that idea of being transparent with your feelings, right? As opposed to your decision making, being transparent with your self-reflection and your feelings. I do appreciate that Vanessa always gives my family dynamic the benefit of the doubt, as if they weren't just going, why is dad screaming at the TV again?
They might start out that way, Stefan, but as they grow, they will appreciate that.
Well, and to that point, like my eldest, six, almost 7, in first grade, the conversations we have with him after school, we have shifted from what did you do at school? What did you learn? We have started saying things. What was something at school that made you feel happy today? What was something at school that made you feel anxious or scared? What was something that made you feel nervous? Like those types of things. And just, oh yeah. And then we share. What was something that made you feel sad at work today? And so then Anna and I get to talk in code about things that we both know happened at work, and we can passive aggressively refer to them, but I do think that modeling is a huge step, right? And it's not, you don't need a psychology degree. You don't need to be a mental health professional to just have conversations about feelings and be transparent about how you deal with them. So like if you're thinking about steps to take as a parent or as a teacher, making small shifts around language to say, well, what are you feeling? And how do you think you should act on that? And like it is never too early to start, because my 3-year-old has that language. Every time he's not allowed to do something, he runs to their parent, Daddy made me feel sad. It's like, yeah, because I wouldn't let you eat 6 cookies for dinner. Daddy's not sharing. It's like, yeah, because I took the cookies away from you so you wouldn't house a whole sleeve of cookies. But they picked that up very quickly. Right? And he picked it up quite a bit faster than my eldest did, who took some explicit instructions. That's the other thing to remember is some kids are just sponges, and a lot of kids are just sponges, and some kids will take like explicit instruction and direct instruction around like how to work on that and be engaged in that emotional regulation, And I think to Debbie's point, I think you're right. Kids know for the most part as they get older when they're dysregulated. For my third grader, 3-year-old, we see when he's overstimulated, and it's a constant guessing game about what's setting him off, and that's just the work you do as a parent. And for my 6-year-old, he's really good about saying, I need to go take a break. But that's because we've coached him into that. He was not for a long time. And thank goodness I've got a wife who works in behavior, right? And so she's really good at those skills. That also makes me think, Vanessa, you were very complimentary about me bringing this to the group and being self-reflective about that. That's because I'm privileged to have a community of support and a wife who not only doesn't mind, but definitely finds a certain element of glee in pointing out when I'm wrong. But also like you two, I know I can bring this to a professional community and be taken seriously and not worried about it. And I think that is a big thing for kids as well. They need to know that they can have a community, a person to be able to bring feelings to, and not that you have to have the answers. It could just be, thank you for telling me that. Here are some ways that I calm down. Here are some ways that I deal with, feeling angry or upset or super happy or whatever.
Yeah, I think a couple things always. What I really like around the Screenagers work, and then Project Sharp, which if you haven't seen their stuff, I'm sure Stefan you have, but that's the gal that was speaking at the event I was at the other day. But one thing I really like about both of these parent guides and these resources is all around this idea of communication and just having these conversations, and how they're not one-off conversations, how they are ongoing conversations you're having all the time. It makes me think of that, like, how do you eat an elephant, right? How do you help your kids start to learn these skills? One bite at a time, one step at a time. And so I love that you are getting these rituals around, let's talk to each other at dinner beyond just that, how was your day, right? Going a little bit deeper. And I think that's what Delaney will say in Screenagers, is it's those kind of those touch points, those points where and it doesn't have to be, I have all the answers and you're doing it right. That's what it's meant to avoid, is to kind of talk about some of these tricky situations. And when it comes to media literacy, what we're seeing, I mean, those conversations happen in the car. They happen when we're watching football, they happen when it comes up. And we talk about, and again, my kids are just really lucky to have me, right? But it is around like, well, why do you think they're doing it that way? What is it making you feel? And why would they want you to feel that? Right. And so it's an ongoing thing. And I think that's a simple thing that parents can do when you so often feel that I don't know what to do. It's moving so fast. I'm the only one who cares. It's just start by having those conversations. And one of the things I heard the other night was, okay, so you already gave, and I think we talked about this too, like, so you already gave your kid a cell phone, or things are getting a little slippery on that slope and you need to sort of rein it in, and to just start with that. We did that recently at our house where we sort of had some habits from the summer and the way we were spending our time in the evenings in the summertime that were trickling over into the start of school, that just, not only did it not feel right, I was like, oh my gosh, like we got to get this. It wasn't feeling good. I was seeing the effect on the kids. And so that's what we said, like, okay, you guys, this has gotten away from us. We've all gotten a little sloppy, my husband and I included. And so here's how we're going to move forward. And it was modeling, and it was just saying, oh, we're going to do a reset. And if that's the normal, then hopefully when those conversations have to have, it's not a big, argument.
When you and your husband had that conversation with your kids, you said we've all gotten a little sloppy, us included. Did you specifically like call out like stuff that you guys were doing, like you and your husband, that like, oh, good for you?
Yeah, we were not always. It was kind of in the summertime. Dinner was happening in waves, and people were eating, in front of a TV here or a show here, and then same thing. We would be like watching a show in the evening, and it just, yeah. And so we said, we're going to turn the TV off. We're not going to do that anymore. One of us, not me, could probably work a little better on their cell phone. Looking at reading is what he calls it.
During football season.
Right. But that's okay. Okay. So here, let's talk about my family for a little bit. No, but my 13-year-old is really into football, and we've had this conversation. He thinks that if he's reading about sports or doing something with fantasy, which, let's be honest, you can stretch that out, whether you're setting your team, checking your ranking, chatting with the person, right? There's a lot of things you can be doing, but he's always argued, well, it's football. Like, it's not time on the stream. Yeah. And sometimes, yes, that I would rather you spend your time doing this than other things, but it's still like, those are the conversations we have had to have, is you don't need to be checking it. Cause that's another area. It was like, he would wake up and he would go check the computer to check. And a lot of it too, to be fair, it is his first, DMing situation that he's been able to do. And so he doesn't have to, he doesn't have the ability to just text with his friends other than outside of like through us. So this is his first, and we talked about that when we let him sign up for fantasy football, that this was okay, but we were going to be keeping an eye on it. And it's so innocent. It really is. But it's his way of connecting with his friends, right? And he has set up, oh, I'm going to go meet so-and-so and throw the football around. He has made those plans on there. So it's kind of that entry point. So we're dealing with that. But, this idea that you don't have to constantly be checking and connected, because what you check in the morning is going to be no different than when you're checking it after school, right? So not that you can't check it, but that let's set a time so that you're it's not just becoming this thing that it's so slippery.
Sounds like
right?
It's spoken by someone who doesn't play fantasy football.
Well, yes. And that is why maybe. Right. I know. But I'm just saying but it's so funny because in his mind, well, I'm doing this. How easy is that for us to convince ourselves?
I am guilty.
We all are, and that's my thing is he's not in trouble. Of course, that's going to be what happens if I'm not putting boundaries in place and holding myself to it. That's the hardest part, is me enforcing it. Right. But he's just doing what a 13-year-old's brain is wired to do. yet he also has this other part of him that wants to be productive and has goals, and he has these other things that he's working towards. And so, you know, finding that balance, right? And that's really what this is about, is the balance. And so I do think that there is probably some emotional manipulation that's happening within these fantasy, so that's interesting too, because there is that sense of urgency that happens within this act. Like I
Peer
need
pressure.
but it is like, but if I don't, I can't tell you the number of times of like, but if I don't do it right now, insert excuse to why it needs to happen right now. So talk to me about that, Stefan, Mr. Emotional Manipulator, having an issue with it.
Well, it's that all I can think of is just the differences in ages in like our kids. 13, and I think research would probably back this up. 13 seems like prime age to start, like that wedge starting to drive, right? Because chemicals in the brain, the pull of that social aspect there. And so I think that's super cool that you've kind of like dipped into that, but you're setting those boundaries, but you also have the perspective of course he's not in trouble. This is his job, and it also has me reflecting on every single loophole I could possibly find when I was a kid or potentially as an adult to like, well, it's for this, it's for that, or like I'm doing homework, or like this is socialized. And we kind of make those loopholes also, like when we start to even the argument around like high quality screen time versus junk food screen time. And one of those like potential high quality is like social interaction. That one's a little bit more fraught because is it replacing in-person real-time interaction? Because then that gets a little messy. And so part of the reason I asked, like, you guys called out your own behavior too. That's huge. That is awesome, I think, because it's so hard to look inward and say, like, I need to deal with this also. And I think of the types of emotional manipulation that happen online, and I saw someone speaking in August, and he said that like he just specifically called out dopamine as a motivator, right? Like it's as opposed to like we always think of it as the feel good chemical. It's the motivator, right? It's motivating you in your brain to find more of that thing. And he also followed that up with, and Debbie, you called attention to this earlier, like bots online are meant to be divisive. It is interesting to me that the majority of information you see, or majority of like those types of like emotional manipulation you see online have a tendency to be divisive. And like, I'm just like, I don't have any evidence to back this up. I'm just thinking about like, we could probably go find a whole bunch of commercials that are like identifying people as the other or using scare tactics. And, and we could probably also find a handful of things that are using like empathy and dopamine and emotional manipulation in that sense. I would guess there's a lot more of the former than there is of the latter. And Debbie, I know I told you about this, but I did this cyber security summit the last week or sometime, and one of the things that I did was I pulled some screenshots of an incident I was aware of in a community where there were reports of like the middle school cross country team, someone pulling up next to them and threatening them with a handgun. And the school district put out there, like, here's what happened. The police department is dealing with it. Right. And they gave out all the information. They informed the public. To my mind, they informed the community. And then I went through and I screenshot. And so I pulled this up at the Cyber Summit. And the idea was I just spent 15, 20 minutes talking about phishing and smishing and like this, the cybersecurity stuff. I said, but that's not the real danger. The real danger is social engineering. It's emotional manipulation. And so I said, here's an example. I put that up there. And I didn't realize I was unintentionally emotionally manipulating the audience until I put that up there on the screen, and the room of like 45 people just goes silent, just like dead silent, because they're looking at it and like, oh my gosh. And so I made a point to point out here, I'm not going to put this one in the show notes because there are some like names that I blurred out, and I don't want people to have access to the slides and go, I mean, technically all of this stuff is on social media, so I'm not super worried about it because they willingly put their information out there. But for our own purposes, I'll try to be descriptive here. The you can probably see those slides, right? Like there's the slides and it has the here's the stuff, but or here's the content, but I specifically point out to people, like, notice that social media has a long time ago instituted like a feature that you don't even have to use words to comment. You can just put a happy face, put a sad face, put a scared face. You can just quote unquote comment with your current emotion, because we know how powerful that is. And then it made a point to call out, look how much interaction this has. So 230 people had reacted to it with some kind of emotion, and then 67 comments, 59 shares. In the small community this happened, that's insane. That is about as viral as it gets in that community. And so then I went through some of these other things. I went through and I screenshot on the Facebook post all of these like community comments, and it's people railing against this school district for not being transparent, for not providing more information, for not giving out all of not following up on it. Like, just people are scared, right? They are. I'm just thinking this was at a middle school. As someone who's got their own kid in school, I'm like, how would I feel if my son was potentially in danger through something like this, if this happened like in our community? And one of the thing I have up on the screen right now is a comment that says, and as I read through the comments, parentheses, assuming they are accurate given the current vacuum of information. This person is admitting they do not have all of the accurate information, but it is not and then they followed up with, it appears approached by isn't an accurate statement either. They're admitting they don't have accurate information. They're admitting they don't have all of the information, but that is not stopping them from making accusatory comments against the local school district. And it was a firestorm of people just whipping themselves into a frenzy. This person that I have on the screen right now is giving an inaccurate account of something that happened. And so like, as I've got people in the room, they're like reading through this and they're seeing all these things. And then I said, does anybody know what actually happened? Cause this had kind of made the rounds. Well, there's a update the next day from the local police department saying that it was all found to be false. It was kids false reporting. It was kids kind of goofing around, not realizing the severity of what they were saying. Right. And so I put a screenshot of the local police department on there, but I also made a point to point out that didn't stop local community members from having adverse reactions to this. Now, demanding certain things happen to the kids and making whatever judgments and whatever. And my favorite one was the last one. If your child calls 911 and the parents are not aware, their 4 or 5-year-old keeps calling, they send an officer, there's spelling errors all over this, to tell the parents one more phone call and you go to jail for the wasted time of the officers. They should have to do some community service for how much it costs the local community and the drone that was sent out. Fact check that. Complete and total garbage, right? That is just not a thing, right? And so like, I kind of have the people in the room, like, they're on my side a little bit. And again, I'm unknowingly kind of manipulating their emotions. And so then I put the original screenshot of the school district back up there. And I said, look how many people commented on this and reacted to it. So it's 231 people reacting to it, 68 comments, 60 shares. And then I went through and I found a bunch of other things from the school district. Here's a picture of the same social media team from the same school district posting about how one of their local elementary schools got a donation from a local bank. 22 people reacted to it. No one commented or shared. They're complaining about transparency. Here's a post from the same school district about a town hall they do bi-monthly in multiple languages in different times of the day and across the week. But no one reacted to that. No one commented on it. And so we used that to dive into a conversation around what motivates us to interact online. And very clearly in the example in this one small case, but also I think just in general around social media, what really whips people into a frenzy is outrage and
or fear. Yeah, fear. So it's so ironic, Stefan, that you share this today. So this morning, within our ESD, we have like an AI leadership team meeting and just kind of talking about recent updates and creating an environment where we can learn from one another. So, like your example sounds very similar to something that happened in one of our districts. I would say it's like a medium-sized district where someone had taken a real photo of a homeless individual, used AI, and put it so that it looked as though they were in places on campus.
Mhm.
And then, like, campus was on lockdown. Um, so, again, like, to your point about what elicits those reactions and how might that manipulate us. Um, I don't know that any of this is necessarily new. I think there's always been components of this in society, but the ease in which things can be generated or shared
Yeah.
has dramatically increased. And so, um, yeah, again, I don't know that I have solutions, but it's just ironic that one of our districts just experienced different, but something similar.
Yeah. Very different parts of the state. Right. And I think that
Mhm.
goes, I think I took us to a dark place with that, and I'm sorry. The Let's go back to that whiskey commercial that made me feel good. uh, I I think you're right. I think that's very insightful, Vanessa, that this isn't necessarily new, right? Like yellow journalism was around a long time ago. And there's certain ethical standards around journalism that we kind of helped curb that. And I think we're in a bit of a new age around that. And I mean, yeah, media literacy is the key to all of this, right? How do you understand the world around you?
Mhm.
And I don't know, it's the only actionable step that's coming to my mind is are those consistent conversations around emotions and feelings and self-regulation and uh, like constant exposure, I think is the other thing. Not that you should be sitting your kids down and be like, all right, now watch this commercial and tell me how you feel, but finding those things in the wild and like harnessing opportunities to say, like, look at this. What is this making you feel? How should we interact? And man, I just love Debbie, your example of like having that meta moment with your family and saying, all right, we slipped a little bit. That's fine. But then having that transparent conversation with your family, I hope I'm half of as good of a parent. My kids get to 13, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think, oh my gosh. Yeah. I just think that it's easy to feel like, and I think you can apply this to a lot of things, right? Like, oh my gosh, um, it's never been this bad, or it's never this, our current state is different for this reason, but it's so much bigger. And honestly, adults, we're not great at, I say I'm obviously great at it. Not just joking, but like, we assume that we're adults, so we just know how to do this. And I think just like kids, this was dropped into adults and they don't always know how to regulate it themselves. And while I am one of them at times, and that is a true thing, I have to constantly remind myself that, okay, in our professional roles, that's a little bit beyond our scope, right? I have to keep coming back to our job. Our responsibility is to equip these young people and help teachers understand ways to help them do this. And it does need to just be integrated. It can't be this thing we're teaching separately in isolation that doesn't feel realistic. We have to start teaching this. Stop, check those gut feelings. I mean, that's check number one, right? Like give yourself a chance to check that gut reaction, that gut feeling. Slow down. I mean, that's powerful stuff. That comparison between look at all the interactions with this post compared to all of these other ones. There's some that had 0 likes or share. You know what I mean? That's very powerful. And so I think right there, and again, when we talk about cybersecurity, where the stuff that's complicated that the IT people have to figure out, like in our jobs, it is this, you know, how is somebody going to get, quote unquote dupe? They're going to get their emotions played on me. My father-in-law, he was smart enough to stop and think about it, but got a text from a woman that he supposedly knew and was asking for financial help. You know what I mean? So and he was like, he texted her, like, is this? And she said, oh, no, that's not me. My phone was compromised or whatever. So it's
good for him.
Yes, I know. But he said he had to, it was one of those things where those are the types of things where I do think every day, how do we protect ourselves? There is the social engineering, I think, is really important. So
Before we wrap up, can I add one more thing?
of course.
So I was reading this article the other day, and it was talking about mirror neurons, and like that's something developmentally like babies are born with, and so they're mimicking like the faces of their parents and like starting to learn and recognize emotion. And it got me kind of, as we're having this conversation, thinking about a few different things. But like my youngest was about 2.5 when we went into lockdown. And so like she was in spaces, with her parents, with us and her brother. But then after that, in a lot of the spaces externally facing, like you're wearing masks. And so, like then it got me thinking about like, okay, I've heard a lot of educators talking about students having difficulty having conversations with other students in the classroom. And it, then in connection with like the mirror neurons, I started, thinking about, oh, there were, potentially a year and a half where students had to wear masks of some sort. And like, is there like psychology behind it that could make this more challenging? But then the article connecting back to education, and Debbie, you made me think of, because you said what's in our locus of control. So this article was saying like some of that group work can be really, really helpful, because like then you're doing a lot of eye contact, you're hearing tone and body language. And so outside of our role as parents, I think that in the classroom, how, even without specifically saying like, pause, how did this make you feel? But like, what are those opportunities for them to engage face to face, to like continue to develop that and be able to identify those emotions, is like something I was thinking about. And then it talked a little bit about if they are doing some group work, then the teacher can come in and give more individualized attention, which can also enhance like the sorry, modeling and empathy and kind of check in and ensuring people are on top, like all of those pieces, kind of summing it up. So apologies for bringing that, but my brain made multiple connections.
I like how Vanessa, again, apologizes. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep a tally on how many times Debbie and I compliment ourselves, because we've both done that like twice. And for Vanessa, we will keep a tally on how often she apologizes for making a good point and productively contributing to the conversation. And who should be apologizing is Debbie, because you're in the middle of making this great point, tying some of these things and putting a real bow on what we're talking about. And she puts this picture of a panda in the chat about breaking bamboo, which we can put in the show notes. That way people see see what you're talking about. But
I thought it illustrated her point really well. It's a sweet story. It was like a adopted baby panda who had humans who would break the bamboo for it to eat as it was learning how to break its own bamboo. So that's the face it makes. It doesn't need to make that face because it's a panda and strong enough to break the bamboo.
as human parents do.
So I just thought it represented what she was talking about.
All right. Any final thoughts on emotional manipulation or empathy bombing?
I think we have more questions than answers, but I loved the conversation.
That's it for this episode of The Slow Scroll. These are messy and important conversations, and we're glad you're in them with us. If something sparked your thinking or unsettled it, we hope you'll sit with it, talk about it, and bring it into your work with kids. You can connect with us, ask questions, or provide feedback using the link to the feedback form in the show notes. Feel free to share the episode, send it to a colleague, or keep the dialogue going in your own circles. Just don't stop talking about what matters.